Hi, this is Shep Altshuler, publisher of TimeSharing Today. Welcome to this broadcast of TimeSharing Today Radio, featuring news and views of owners and industry professionals. Today we are being joined by Allan Rimoin from Kingston, Ontario, Canada. Allan and his wife have been timeshare owners for well over 20 years, and we invited him to share his experiences as a happy owner of multiple weeks. Hi, Allan. Welcome to the broadcast.
Hi, Shep. How are you doing?
Now, you've been involved in timesharing for quite some time. Tell our listeners a little bit about how long you've been a timeshare owner.
I've been a timeshare owner since 1992.
And how did you first get into it? What motivated you to become a timeshare owner?
Well, I owned a restaurant across from Smuggler's Notch Resort in Vermont, which is a Gold Crown resort. And most of my customers who weren't locals, in fact, just about all of them who weren't locals, were timeshare owners, either who owned at the resort or people who were there in exchange. So that's how I kind of learned about timesharing from them and about their experience. And then when we took our first vacation in 1992, we bought the restaurant in 91. After a year, we went away down to Negro Beach in Jamaica for a week, and I think we paid something like $120 for what was a very small hotel room. And I realized this is not the way I want a vacation, and I don't want to spend that kind of money. And on the way back home in the plane, I picked up the airline magazine, and there was an ad for a timeshare sales person from Utah. He had a whole list of places he was selling. I called him after I got back to Vermont and ended up buying 2 studio weeks at the Pacifica Club in Ixtapa from him. And that's basically how I first got into timesharing.
Kind of interesting. So familiarity does breed some interesting results there. Having proximity to owners is always a good source for that. Now, how many properties have you owned over the years, and what do you currently own?
Well, besides those 2 weeks at Pacifica, which I bought in 92, I made an exchange with one of them. I went down to Cozumel, stayed at the Sol Caribe, which is called something else now, and ended up buying a 1-bedroom there. I think I bought it through TimeSharing Today, and I kept that, and then it became all-inclusive, and I wasn't really interested in an all-inclusive because owning a restaurant, we were eating restaurant food every day, and when we went away, we wanted to be able to do our own cooking. So I eventually sold at the Sol Caribe, and I sold at the Pacifica. We can get into that later. And presently, I own 8 weeks at 6 different resorts.
Oh, and where are they? Because it seems that you have an affinity for Mexico. Where are these resorts located?
The Village Green at Stowe, and I bought there so that when we sold our restaurant in Vermont and left Vermont, I'd be able to go back every year and visit friends. And so in a 2-bedroom at the Village Green at Stowe, I own 2 weeks of a 1-bedroom at Indian Wells Condo Share outside of Palm Springs. I own a 2-bedroom 1 week there at Vista Mirage in Palm Springs. I own a 1 week, a 1-bedroom at Americana Village in Lake Tahoe, and then a 2-bedroom at the Tahoe Summit. And the only one I own in Mexico right now is at the Marina Fiesta in Cabo, and I own 2 weeks of a studio at the Marina Fiesta.
Now,
together it's 8 weeks.
Total of 8. You mentioned that. And how do you utilize the ownership? Do you use your home resorts? Do you exchange? Is it a combination, or what's the ratio and the frequency that you're
It's pretty much all exchanging, except for the Village Green at Stowe. We go back every year. It's close. We can drive there. It's the only one we could drive to, actually. And we're living in Kingston, Ontario now, so it's about a 5-hour drive. And we bought it for the purpose of going back every year, visiting friends. It's generally just my wife and myself, although we've had other friends come and stay with us for either the whole week or part of the week. We really enjoy going back there every year. Otherwise, it's all exchanges. We've been to the Vista Mirage once for a week. We enjoyed it in Palm Springs. While we were there, we went to visit the Indian Wells Condo Share just to see what the property looked like. But except for that, we haven't even seen any of the other resorts. Well, I shouldn't say that. Marina Fiesta, we bought it 3 years ago, and so far we've been going back every year, and we're going back this year as well. We go back in February for 2 weeks.
What are your thoughts about the economic value? You mentioned it briefly, but there's been a definite upward trend in maintenance fees. We hear about the frequency of special assessments, and you talked about your experience in renting the the hotel room on that vacation, and then you compared the value of timeshares. What do you see in terms of the economic value and the trends of owning a timeshare now that you've been at this for such a long time?
Okay, well, first of all, I'd say don't buy a timeshare as an investment, and I think you'll see that everywhere. In terms of a holiday experience, it definitely has value. You get to live in an apartment instead of in a room. And as I said, you're able to save money by cooking in as little or as much as you wish. We happen to like to cook in. So I think the economic value is there. As far as trends go, we've only bought weeks. We're very happy with weeks, even though in some cases it maybe only used 5 or 6 days. I still think it was worth it. I've read too many negative things about points to want to go the route of points. One thing I've noticed, I belong to RCI, and one thing I've noticed with RCI is in Mexico and in the Caribbean for exchanging, probably 80 to 90% of the resorts are all-inclusive. And that's a trend that I don't like. I find it starts to become too expensive once you have to do it that way. And if you want to do all-inclusive, you're better off going to an all-inclusive resort that includes everything, including the airfare. It'll end up being cheaper to do it that way. So I don't like that tendency towards the all-inclusive with RCI in Mexico and in the Caribbean. I'm not sure what other trends you're referring to.
Well, have you had any experiences with your resorts with unexpected special assessments or sharp increases in maintenance fees that weren't clearly disclosed properly from your perspective? Any surprises relative to the economics?
Well, there was one assessment that lasted about 3 years with Americana Village, and it meant that my one bedroom was costing me about $900 a week, which is a lot more than I normally pay for one bedroom. But they explained, and I could see that they used the money to really upgrade the resort. So now I don't go back there. I don't go there, so I haven't had a chance to use it. But I get good trading value with it. So although I feel I'm paying too much as compared to my other resorts, I accept it. The only other assessment that I was given, and actually arrived this year because of the hurricane in Cabo San Lucas in September, I was given a voluntary assessment of $179 on my maintenance fees for 2015. And again, voluntary, and maybe the reason is because it's a right to use for X number of years as opposed to deeded, and perhaps they're not allowed to make it a compulsory assessment. I don't know, but I felt they needed the money. $179 wasn't a huge amount of money, and I sent them the assessment of $179. The only instances I've had.
So you have experience as in the Caribbean and Mexico. It's not uncommon. It's prevalent to see right-to-use products. How do you compare that right-to-use versus the deeded property? Do you see pluses and minuses between the two?
You know, right-to-use, all of my properties except for Marina Fiesta in Mexico are deeded. That's just the way they were. I bought them. I don't have any children who will inherit them. I'm not sure what's going to happen with them after I'm gone. At this point, I don't particularly want to get out of them, so I'm not concerned about, the fact that it means I have to sell them. But I could see advantages in the future for people if they know they're only buying a timeshare for 10 years or 15 years, and now maybe they have a family and they think, well, once they get older, their family may not want it. Let's have an easy out. The contract will end. That might be a benefit for some people.
Well, we're definitely looking at the younger generations that they're on a different kind of attitude towards long-term responsibilities. There was a recent study saying that a lot of millennials are not interested in owning homes. They don't want to have a 30-year mortgage. They're looking to rent and having that flexibility. So the trend among resorts, and in particular legacy resorts that I've been focused on, there is this trend and growing interest in these right-to-use, limited right-to-use products, so that it offers the kind of a flexibility that if you like it, you can stay with it, and if you feel you want to move on and try something else, you have that option as well.
I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, and we think the process of making that happen is a little bit complicated, but there is definitely a trend in that direction. Did you say you sold some timeshares, or you haven't sold timeshares?
No, I did sell some timeshares. I sold when I sold the timeshares I sold were my original purchases in Mexico that I made in the early 90s, and I probably sold them after 2 or 3 years. Basically, I sold them all through Timesharing Today. I sold my weeks at the Pacifica Club because I decided that I wanted, since I knew I was going to be exchanging, I wanted to own something bigger than a studio. And I had 2 weeks of a studio. So I sold my weeks in Pacifica Club, and I sold my week to Sol Carib because it turned all-inclusive. It was at least 10 years ago. I certainly didn't get back what I paid for them, but I don't remember exactly, how much I lost.
But there is a resale market, and we know that that's a depressed marketplace, and it's certainly is reflective of the economy and just general conditions within the timeshare industry. But people are making sales, and there are buyers out there looking for good values. So it's just a matter of matching up the opportunities and finding the right buyer and the right seller. So deals are definitely being made. Have you been active on any timeshare boards?
No, I haven't.
But it seems to me, based on things that you were saying about special assessments and maintenance fees, that the resorts at which you own have done a pretty good job at communicating with the owners. Is that true?
Yeah, I would agree. I don't know whether I've just been lucky or whether I did enough research to find out that people weren't complaining about these resorts. But the resorts that I've bought at have really been pretty reasonable. The only one, as I said, was the America kind of Village when they did a major renovation.
Right.
And then the price went up for a number of years.
Right. So that that does happen, and as long as the communications are there and people are just not getting hit out of the blue with a surprise, and it can be justified, then they can get the cooperation of the owners. And sometimes it takes a little time to get that message out properly, so it's not an overnight process.
And we may not like it, but we can understand it.
Exactly. Have you had any experience with timeshare rentals? Have you done anything in that area? Have you ever rented?
Once I rented through a local newspaper. It was actually an exchange that I had and I couldn't use, and I ended up actually a couple of times I've rented it out, and for pretty much what my maintenance fees and exchange fees were.
Right, but you haven't been a renter yourself, where you rented units from.
No, I own enough.
That you have enough on your plate to do that. Now, what's your assessment of the current situation in Mexico? There was just a travel alert cautioning travelers to Acapulco, which was a dream honeymoon destination about 25, 30 years ago. Concerns now about violence in Mexico. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I've over the years, I've exchanged to quite a number of resort areas in Mexico. In the last 3 years, 3 or 4 years, we've gone down to the Mayan Riviera once, and the rest of the time we're in Cabo San Lucas. But, in the Mayan Riviera, it seems relatively safe. A lot of police and soldiers around with guns, and if you don't like seeing that, then probably don't go there. We rented a car while we were there, so we got to see a lot of police and soldiers. If you only stay in the resort, then it'll just be a resort experience, which is fine. In Cabo San Lucas, we always feel safe. We walk around the town at night, where the restaurants are, where tourists go. It's not an area where you have to worry about, drugs, so you don't have to worry about drug violence. While we were in Cabo, actually, one thing we've noticed over the years, where before you get 1 or 2 cruise ships coming in for a day, now in the past 3 years, there are more cruise ships arriving, and they're staying longer because they've stopped going to Acapulco, or they stopped going to Mazatlan, or they've stopped going to Puerto Vallarta because further north there is violence. But down in Cabo, I'm going to say it's probably the safest place in Mexico. And you're as safe as you are in your hometown. Don't do things you wouldn't do in your hometown. That's all.
Exactly. Violence not limited to any geographical area now. In this country, it's popping up all around the country. So we were all sharing those concerns, and we looked at what happened with the Boston Marathon. So you have to just make up your mind that you're going to go and keep your eyes open and be streets.
You ask at the front desk. I mean, anywhere I go on vacation, where is it safe to walk at night?
Right.
They'll tell you.
Now, we're all aware that there's so much negative news about timeshares, and the scams are proliferating and people are constantly getting ripped off, and there is a downward pressure on resales. But how do you feel about the future of the concept of vacation ownership?
I'm happy about vacation ownership for myself, what my experience is and what I expect it will continue to be. I am concerned about the future, though. For one thing, a lot of younger families and couples right now seem to be using the internet now to get last minute and what they hope will be discounted vacations. And and among those vacations are basically what I would call timeshare vacations, because there are a number of websites out there, whether they're RCI affiliated websites or websites like Sky Auction, where you can get a week of timeshare for $200 or $300. So it makes you wonder, why should someone pay maintenance fees and then an exchange fee to go somewhere where they can get on the internet, maybe a month before, 2 months before for $200? I could see where couples or families aren't going to be plunking down money to buy timeshares. Not sure how we can solve that problem.
It is a challenge, and you have to realize that it's not always 100% of the marketplace does that. There may be a growing number of people that are looking for this short-term, instant gratification experience, but there are others that, particularly I feel younger people with younger families, they have to do a little bit more advanced planning. They have to plan around their kids' agendas, they have to plan around their own work agendas, so they may have a little longer view, and that's why I feel the limited right to use has so much potential, that people will have a tendency to look a little bit longer term. And there are those people that want instant gratification, and there's plenty of good values. And the hotel industry now is kind of the same situation, where if you go online and check the booking engines, you look a month out and you find that a resort may be asking $250 a night. Then you look at the booking engines a week before, you might find that it's now $150 a night. So they're looking to fill up the rooms and increase their occupancies, and many resorts are also looking at the potential and they have the need to generate revenues, and they're looking at the rental marketplace as well, and they have to be able to compete against the the hotels that are really sophisticated. But there is that opportunity to serve those people that have shorter term objectives in terms of trying to get a quick getaway, and the industry does try to cater to that segment of the market. Now, do you have any specific advice for owners and maybe prospective owners based upon your years of experience? Somebody came to you and spoke to you and your wife. What would be the best piece of advice that you could lend somebody?
Well, there's probably a number of things. The first thing would be don't buy from the developer. It's going to cost you much more to do it that way. Buy on the resale market. I buy primarily for exchange purposes, so I'm going to say if you're buying for exchange purposes, try to buy at least a one-bedroom or preferably a two-bedroom unit. Now I'm talking RCI terminology now, but if you can buy a Gold Crown or a Resort of International Distinction, that's a plus because it has better trading power. You should buy in a popular, high-profile tourist area, and in high season only. I would definitely say in high season only. And then after you've sort of made those decisions, check out, or even before, check out reviews of the resort. You can go on TripAdvisor, other ways on the web to the different websites that deal with time sharing. They'll have reviews. Check out reviews. See what the people who own there have to say about them. You might be finding out that they're expecting an assessment or things are falling apart or whatever. Another thing that's very important, I think, for people who want to exchange, you have to be able to plan your vacation a year ahead. and you have to be flexible. I personally have never had a problem exchanging through RCI. I always put my request in a year to a year and a half ahead, and 90% of the time I get what I want online immediately. I don't have to put in a request. So unlike many people who seem to be having problems with RCI, I'm always getting good results. And I think it's because they're not flexible enough, and they try and make their exchanges 6 months ahead or 3 months ahead.
Planning is always helpful. Thank you, Allan. I really appreciate you joining us today. I think you've lent some very good insights to for our listeners.
Thank you. It's really been interesting thinking about answers for some of your questions, and things I've thought about over the years but sort of never wrote about before. So this time I got to talk about it.
And there's nothing like hearing an owner's perspective of what their experience has been. It's always valuable to me, and I think to our listeners as well. And this concludes this broadcast of TimeSharing Today Radio. Your views, experiences, and opinions are very important. And if you'd like to comment on today's broadcast or have a suggestion for a future broadcast, please email staff@tstoday.com. Until next time,